Are you journeying through grief and needing a little extra support, inspiration, healing, and guidance? Join me in turning your losses into gains. Hi, my friend. I'm Tara Accardo. I'm a certified grief and spiritual life coach and creator of the Losses Become Gains online community and podcast. I'm an only child who lost both parents to cancer within 6 months of each other, followed by my sweet fur baby soon after. After all of this, I knew I was meant to do more with what I had been through, and now that means supporting and empowering grievers just like you. I'm a wife, mama-to-be, grieving daughter, healer of the heart, soul, and mind after loss, your North Star of sorts, and I'm here to help support you and move you through your grief. I want for you to feel like I'm your bestie in the grief space and know that whatever you're going through, there's someone out there who just gets it and makes you feel seen, heard, validated, and supported. Few topics are off limits here because grief and loss don't hold back either. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what all of this means for you, coping tools, lifestyle development topics, and impactful mindset shifts to take you from just surviving to thriving after loss and in your grief. So grab a cup of your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and show up with an open heart and mind. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo, and I'm so excited to share this extremely special guest and dear friend and truly just a very calming, healing soul on the podcast today. Sharna Southan is a pregnancy loss practitioner and certified trauma-informed coach. She is also a mom to her beautiful rainbow baby. She is a business owner and a wife who is based in Australia and following her heart and soul into her business after her own pregnancy loss in 2017. Much like me, Sharna believes that our adversity gives us an opportunity to grow. She is all about navigating healing, recovery, and support after pregnancy, infant, or child loss. She founded the Institute of Healing Through Pregnancy Loss to support parents of these types of losses by creating her transformative pregnancy loss recovery method and teaching her signature pregnancy loss practitioner certification program. She is also a fellow podcaster, and I think we even launched ours around the same week. I'm not even joking, possibly on the same day, if I'm remembering correctly. And there she sheds light on pregnancy loss, healing, and recovery. And here on the Losses Become Gains podcast, we really haven't fully addressed pregnancy, infant, and child loss yet in such an intentional and detailed way. So that is very much what we're doing in today's episode. So this episode certainly is for anybody who has been through that type of loss or any of those types of loss and could just use a little extra support and guidance and a space to feel seen today. But I personally have not gone through this type of loss. This is exactly why I wanted to bring Sharna on. She is like my go-to girl in this space. And you guys, I found this so educational. This was such a beautiful, transformative, and impactful conversation. I really cannot wait to share this with you. And I thought this was not only opportune timing with myself being pregnant with my first daughter, but because I wanted to use this as an opportunity to educate myself. But since this episode is also launching right before the holidays, I wanted to make sure we have this conversation now so we can best support those who have seen this kind of loss and might be struggling this season. But trust me, we get into way more here and some absolutely amazing mindset shifts that I know you are not going to want to miss. And so much so that we literally talked for over 2 hours and I had to split this episode into two. But I promise you, every single minute is worth it. So today is part one. And here we're really digging into her truly heartbreaking story of loss. Like I've never heard a loss story quite like this. So I really hope you stick around for that. But also just how pregnancy and infant and child loss can affect our relationships, even how the loss of her father affected her on top of all of this and what that journey has been like for her. and how she has continued to just cope and not just survive, but truly thrive in her life over all of these years and so much more. So stay tuned for next week's episode as well, where we get into even more around this topic, even more coping tools, and some really impactful ways to think about and handle our grief that you are going to want to hear, I assure you. But for today, I hope you enjoy part 1. So with that, let's get into it. Sharna, welcome to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I am truly just so happy to have you here and talking about such an important and very impactful topic that we have not covered on the podcast here yet. So truly just thank you in advance for your expertise and guidance and knowledge and experience too with this topic. I cannot wait to get into this with you and hear what you have to say. I would love to also just have you tell kind of your story of loss and grief. You mentioned Ravo baby. So, and this is really why I wanted to talk to you today for sure, because anybody here who either is going through this themselves or knows somebody who is either trouble conceiving, has lost a baby perhaps before they got to full term, have lost a child even after they were born, anything really in between. Again, you are like my go-to girl in this topic. So I want to hear your story for sure. And then maybe we can talk about some of just the ways that you've healed. I'm sure we would have gotten there anyway, but I think I agree with you so wholeheartedly about the nature aspect and being able to really ground yourself. And that can be very healing. So yeah, would you mind just telling us a little bit about just what your journey has looked like, again, whatever you're comfortable with. And then we can talk about maybe the healing aspect of all of this, which is a big topic to cover, but
yeah, very big. But so I always wanted to have a child. I never really wanted a big family. I am one of 4 children. So growing up, I realized it wasn't easy for my parents to have 4 kids and have obviously a family of 6.
Yeah.
So everything cost a lot just to even go out and do all of the things. So I kind of just wanted a smaller family so I could, focus my energy and not that I ever doubted the fact that I'd have enough love or anything. It was just more that I was just like, I'd be comfortable with 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And that was always a part of my story in my mind. And I never thought that I would have any issues because obviously my mom, she had 4 kids.
Yeah.
She tried 4 times, got 4 kids. And there was no talk about loss in my family. So I was never exposed to pregnancy loss at all. And there was never talk about it in my world.
Right.
We were trying to conceive for about 5 years.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, for the first couple of years, we'll just, I don't know, trying without sort of going into all of the nitty-gritty parts.
Yeah.
And we got through the first couple of years and we're like, okay, I'm actually, I'm 32 or something at that point. So I had been on contraception since I was 13. So I was like, maybe there is something that is happening inside of me that I don't know about.
Right.
So at that point we went and saw our GP who referred us to a fertility specialist, and we went and obviously saw the fertility specialist. He put me on tablets to hurry things along, essentially. This is kind of, in his words, he actually goes, this is kind of going to shortcut the process.
Interesting.
This is going to get you pregnant quicker. It's going to, have more eggs, more opportunity to be fertilized. And at that point, I was like, I don't care. I'll do anything to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Looking back over all of that now and knowing what I know now, I'm like, I know that it wasn't the best decision that I should have made, but I did what I did in the moment with the education and the knowledge and everything I had at the time. So I was like, yep, cool, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we did, and went through one set of, or a couple of months of the treatment, and actually fell pregnant. But because I didn't know my body at all, because I'd been on the pill for so long,
right,
I didn't actually know I'd missed my period. So I was a lot further along than probably what I should have been by the time I realized I was pregnant.
Gotcha.
So we went to the doctors. She confirmed that I was pregnant. She booked me in for an ultrasound. Obviously, most people go around the 6-week mark-ish when they've missed their period, and by the time they find out they're pregnant and they go for their ultrasounds, it's usually around that time. I kind of worked out that by the time I got to the ultrasound, I should have been about 10 weeks.
Right.
And when we got there, I obviously, being my first pregnancy, I had no idea how I was meant to feel physically.
Right.
But I was feeling very tired, very, very exhausted. And I was like, this is only early. Like, this is going to get worse. I don't know how I'm going to be able to cope. We got into the ultrasound appointment, and the technician was looking. He went quiet, and he's like, I can't see anything, but let's do an internal. So he went and obviously got me to empty out my bladder, and then he did an internal ultrasound. And again, he just went quiet. And at some point, he just turned to me and he goes, "I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat." And I just remember saying, I'm like, try again. Just try again.
Yeah.
Like, keep trying. This cannot be my reality. Like, I didn't know about miscarriage, but I had, like, my body was like, this is my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And he went out and got a senior technician. And then he came back in and did the ultrasounds again. And he goes, "I'm sorry. We can't find the heartbeat. It had stopped growing at 7 weeks."
Wow.
So what I had experienced, which I did I did my own research because no one told me what was actually happening. I'd experienced a miscarriage. So my body had actually miscarried, and I had no idea.
Wow.
Until I'd gone into the ultrasound appointment, and the time frame was 3 weeks. So my baby had stopped growing at 7 weeks, and I figured I was about 10 weeks.
Okay.
So my GP said to me, she goes, "Usually it takes about 3 weeks for your body to realize that the pregnancy isn't viable anymore."
Wow.
And it will start the miscarrying process after that.
Oh my God.
So she's like, "You can just go home and it will just do it on it. Like, your body will do it on its own."
Oh my God.
And I was like, okay. Like,
not helpful, for one, but
I was like,
what?
Yeah, I was not at all prepared. She goes, "It'll be like a heavy period." And I was like, okay, cool. In my mind, I'm like, obviously still in shock, but like, I've known heavy periods before.
Sure.
I was like, if that's what it's going to be, then I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I went home, and she was kind of smack on the time frame, because so I'd gone in for the ultrasound. It was like a Friday, so I had to go the weekend, and then I had a doctor's appointment again like the following week.
Okay.
But over the weekend, I started miscarrying, I started bleeding, and I was bleeding to the point of passing out. And I got to the point where I just said to my husband, like, "Don't go in the bathroom. Like, just do not go in there, because I can't clean up after myself." And I was laying on the floor in my bedroom with my feet up in the air, and I rang Mum and I said, "I'm going to die. Like, there's no way that anyone can survive this, losing this amount of blood. And we Googled, because that's what you do. No one tells you what you're meant to experience. You Google.
It's insane to me.
And my husband's like, oh, it can last up to 10 days. And I was like,
what?
No,
that's
the bleeding.
Not possible.
I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Like, that's legit. I had it in my mind. I'm like, this is it. I'm done.
Yeah.
And then I started contracting like the second day. And I have epilepsy, so I'm not actually allowed to take most pain relief medications.
Mm-hmm.
So I had Panadol, so like paracetamol at home. And I was like, I can only take this. This is it. This is all I've got. And I didn't actually know that I was having contractions. I didn't know that that's what I was experiencing until I got to the hospital. So Monday rolled around. I couldn't walk. They ended up, my mum came and picked me and my husband up and took me to the doctors. They got a wheelchair for me and came out to the car park and wheeled me into their nurses' station. And from there, they called the ambulance, and the ambulance took me up to the hospital, which is 45 minutes away, that does any births and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We've got a hospital here, but they don't do anything really.
Yeah.
They just do minor sicknesses and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So in the ambulance, I actually, the ambulance officer, I've spoken about this like in my stories like so much before, because the ambulance officer that showed up was the ambulance officer that's shown up for me probably 3 or 4 times prior when I've had my seizures.
Oh my God.
And they've called the ambulance, and then he's shown up. Like, so I ended up having this really incredible relationship with this ambulance officer. And I said to him, I'm like, he's got to have been sent by Dad. Like, he had to have been my guardian angel type thing that had been sent by my dad. I'm like, he's got to be it. Because every time every seizure that I've ever had, you know, if someone's been around me to call the ambulance, he's been the one to come out. And he came with the miscarriage as well. So he was in the back with me, like in the ambulance, and obviously feeding the pain relief to me, and coaching me through the contractions. And then we got to the hospital, and they rushed me in. I was sort of in and out quite quickly, really. But the first nurse that sort of saw me out of the ambulance, because obviously in ER, when you get the ambulance officers come through, then there's like nurses and stuff and midwives and not midwives. I don't know.
Other people. There's a lot of other chaos around. Yeah.
They're always just standing there ready to obviously get the information of who I am and what's happened and all of that. And one of the nurses, she just asked me directly. She's like, "What's happened?" And I said, "I'm having a miscarriage." And she just stared at me blankly. And I was like, "What? Did you hear me?"
Excuse me.
Like there was no response.
What?
And I was like, did I say it right? Did I think that I said it? Like, did I not say it out loud? Like, what is actually happening? She didn't know how to respond to me saying that. So she kind of just shut down. And then I was put in ER. They had a bed and they put me in ER. And we ended up having a nurse who was incredibly beautiful, especially for my husband. She was cracking jokes with him like the whole time, which was just lightening up.
It just needed
little mood,
some comic relief.
In a really nice way. It was not that she was dismissing me at all. Like, she was there for me the whole time.
Yeah.
But she was also there for my husband as well, because obviously he's witnessing everything that's going on.
Your poor husband too. Oh my God.
And my mother-in-law ended up coming up as well, and being there for obviously my husband. And so the obstetrician, like gynecologist, they called one in and he had a look and he's like, you're miscarrying, but you're contracting and the contractions aren't going to stop. So we need to do a D&C. And I was like, at that point, I was on morphine, on a morphine drip, and I'm just like, okay, I'm like, do whatever.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, obviously, what I know now. And I would have, like, we're going in for the D&C because I've got nothing from that pregnancy. I don't even have an ultrasound, and I didn't even know to ask for anything.
Yeah.
But I went in for the D&C. The nurse, obviously, that was just so it was in between the surgery and so in that little waiting bay type thing before they wheel you into the room.
Mm-hmm.
And the nurse said to me, she was like, oh, after this procedure, you'll be fertile for about a month or 2 months or something. And I was like,
I'm sorry. I have no words right now.
Yeah. I didn't have any words either. I was just like,
that's what you choose to say?
In my head, I'm like, do you know what I'm going in for?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
wow.
I wasn't met with much support in terms of the medical staff.
That's so sad.
And then after it was done, I woke up in a recovery by myself. And we were sent home. That was it. God.
No instructions, for lack of a better term, no debrief, for lack of a better term. Like, okay, here's what happened. Here's what you might feel now. Just, okay, go on and live your life after you just went through one of the most traumatic things you'll ever go through in your entire life.
Yeah.
That's beyond shocking and disappointing. I don't know. I'm like having a hard. I remember listening to your episode on your podcast, actually, which, by the way, is going to be in the show notes. It's all linked. But a little plug. But no, seriously, and all jokes aside, like I remember listening to that, and I always wanted to like ask you about this again because I couldn't. I mean, it's really interesting. Not obviously being in the medical world myself, I always wonder about things like that. I'm like, is it a lack of education? Is it because they see these things so often or more often that they're kind of more numb to it? I don't know. If there's anybody here listening in the medical field, please enlighten this situation. Maybe that was like, I'm certainly sure that was not just exclusive to your hospital. Unfortunately, I'm sure that's a wider, issue, to say the least. So what did you do? How did you even begin to, I'm going to say process this? And I don't, just like, what were your next steps? What did you do?
I kind of just,
like, where do you go from there? I mean,
I kind of just like really lent on anything that I had been through before.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, speaking to you, I think it was me when I interviewed.
Yes.
I spoke about, like, obviously that my dad had died when I was 19.
I was about to ask you to elaborate on that a little bit too. Yeah. And I'm sorry, we didn't even like talk about that because I know we're so like kind of focused on the pregnancy part of this episode, but yes, please mention that because I know you mentioned that in your kind of story and your dad sort of sent this angel ER nurse ambulance guy to you. But yeah, touch on that because you've seen more than one loss other than just this. And yeah,
I guess like we all go through obviously losses in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and that's why you've created what you've created too, because we go through so many different losses. There's obviously when you go through a parent loss, that's something that you never anticipate because your parents are meant to grow old.
Mm-hmm.
But when you lose them young, you're like, no, this goes against everything.
Yeah.
that should be happening.
Yeah.
And my dad died when he was 49, so I was 19.
It's so young.
And I didn't process his death well at all. And I think being 19, there was no way that I could, because I was like, I wasn't taught anything. I wasn't given the tools to process grief and death, and especially when it's, you know, obviously someone so close to you. And it goes against the natural order. Like, you're not meant to, like my pop said to me at the time, he's like, he's not meant to go before me. My pop was, you know, in his 70s or something. And he was like, or 80s. And he's like, you know, he's not meant to go before me.
Yeah.
And I remember that so clearly. I'm just like, it's like, for him, that was so like against the natural order as well. He's like, it's not meant to happen.
Yeah. My grandma said the same thing about my mom. She's still trying to figure out, like, processing that. And yeah.
So I think I was in therapy until I was about 25. And then obviously in and out of therapy for a while. A lot of things fell apart because I couldn't process, obviously, what I was dealing with. So I was having issues with relationships and just life, work. It just kept popping up everywhere. And so I learned a lot, obviously, in therapy. What I don't know if there was any specific, it wasn't specific things that she gave me, essentially, like tools.
Yeah.
But like, from what we spoke about and how she sort of talked about things, I kind of created tools for myself.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then, or created like processes.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So
kind of just figured out what worked for you, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of just lent on the fact that I knew what grief was. I knew the feeling of being there.
Right.
And I had no idea that I was going to be thrust back into the depths of grief again.
Yeah.
And it feels so different. I remember replaying over the day that I went on this hot walk, and I was like, that was the day I killed my baby. Like, that was the day.
God.
And so I went and replayed that day over and over and over in my head, thinking I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done all of these things. And that blame that you put on yourself, the guilt that you feel, the shame that you feel, is just, it's next level. Like, obviously I knew what grief felt like, but then it's mixed in with all of these other really heavy emotions. So I had to, like, I let myself cry. I let myself be angry. I did all of the things. I released emotions. Like, if I felt like I needed to scream, freaking scream, I grabbed a pillow and I screamed into a pillow. If I felt like I needed to hit something, I hit something. But I punched, like, the bed and stuff like that. It wasn't people. And I'm not a boxer or anyone to go to the gym and hit like a boxing bag. So I was like, what can I hit?
You got to get what's available. Sometimes it comes on very sporadically. You just got to, like, grab something nearby.
Yeah. And a lot of the time,
some inanimate object.
I would punch, like, the cushions of the chairs. I would punch the bed. I'd punch, like, something, obviously, as well, that I'm not going to hurt myself on, because I don't want to end up with.
No glass here. Like, do this wisely.
Like, I'm not good with pain, so I'm not going to intentionally.
We don't need more pain, physical pain, on top of the emotional pain we're already going through, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I just tried to release all of the stuff that was coming through. And I knew that I needed to do it because of obviously being in that place before. And I was diagnosed with clinical depression and high functioning anxiety when Dad died. So I knew that I didn't handle that very well at all. And I had the choice in that moment of my miscarriage to go down that path again. Could easily have gone down that path again. Yeah. my husband could see me going down there. He's like,
oh, that's scary.
No, you're going into that depressive state again.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to make the conscious decisions to start shifting myself back out of it and doing things that helped me get myself out of it. And one of the things was being able to get outside and go for a walk. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, my physical body wouldn't let me actually walk. I think for a couple of weeks, I couldn't physically move. My body was so depleted.
Yeah.
So for the first couple of weeks, I was focusing a lot on my emotional health and my mental health. And then as that was starting to come good, I realized that my physical health had deteriorated a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an elite athlete when I was younger. So I was like, this is not.
You know what it
my
felt
body.
like. Yeah.
Yeah. Like my body's not meant to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going back to the GP, where I ended up having to have a bunch of iron infusions because my iron was so low. She ended up doing a bunch of blood tests to check all my other nutrients like that your body has. It's meant to be all in good ratios, and there was a whole bunch that were out. So gosh. I went on this like treatment plan type thing over the next few months to get my physical body back up to where it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to proactively I had to process my emotions. I had to start reframing those thoughts that were in my head, because there was no truth to the fact that I had actually killed my baby.
Yeah.
And I had to come to that realization myself. I was like,
no one could tell you that. Yeah.
No. But it's a really hard place to come to, like, because you just think they died inside of you, that it had to have been you.
It's your responsibility in a way. But I'm so glad you're touching on this, because I don't know if like anybody here listening has either been through this, or again, like if anybody knows someone who's going through this and dealing with, I'm just so happy you touched on this guilt and regret, because whether it's a child loss or whatever it is, we harbor so much of that. And I feel like that's one of the things that often keeps us stuck in our grief, and it prevents us from, there's a lot of things that can prevent us from moving forward, but that I think is one of the biggest ones. And like I said, like it is not something someone can tell you to just stop being guilty. You didn't do anything. You're fine. It's this, it's that. That has to come from within. And so like, I always kind of joke, like we have to be our own grief coach in a way, but like, how do you, it's just amazing. Like what we can all process and do, like the same brain that is like the one that is going through the loss and is trying to process all of this is the same one that has to also get us, I'm not going to say out of it, but through it by come hell or high water. Like when you take a step back and really think about that, it is a wonder that any of us are like functioning even remotely, like, okay. I hate to laugh at that, but it's so true, because it's like, it's mind-blowing, but what we're capable of, but we are capable of it. And that's just like the hope I want to inspire in anyone listening to this today. But as you've been saying, and I want to let you continue, but like, there's so much, there is effort and there is work, unfortunately, that we have to do on top of all of this. Like the last thing we want to do is like work, right? It's just like, oh my God, we've been through enough. But something you said earlier that really just stuck with me, and it is so true, is it is a choice. And we didn't necessarily choose to go through the loss that we have, but we do, and we can make an active choice to just baby step by baby step every single day, do one thing, right? That makes us feel okay again, that heals us a little bit, that gets us out of the house, whatever it is. So for you, it sounds like walking or, whatever, getting back in nature. Like I am so with you on that. That was one of the things for me too, that got, I don't know if it was the oxygen or whatever it was. And my mom was a big walker, so I think I felt closer to her in some ways. And it's trippy because you realize like life goes on, right? Like you see the people around you living their life, and you see the doctors or whatever, they're just like, okay, on to the next. And you're just like, wow, this is humbling. And I feel like you're almost grieving that too. And that can almost like add to the loneliness that we feel. And whether it's like, I kind of joke like self-imposed loneliness, because it almost sounds like you kind of like did what I did too, is like we sort of just backed out and was like, I actually want to be by myself, which I don't know how you feel about this. I actually encourage that a little bit, because we do have to sort of get to know ourselves again. And that alone time sometimes is important, but it can also be, there's a fine line, right? We need to have a good support system. I love that you went to therapy. I did as well. And that can be super beneficial. Whoever you're going to, a coach, like one of us, or, whoever, just having someone around you who gets it and understands it and is not going to rush you, even though you might feel rushed to, I'm going to say, get back to normal, so to speak.
My whole world had been tipped on its head.
Yeah.
But I allowed myself to be in that confusion and overwhelm and crappy emotions, like painful emotions. And then I realized, because I allowed myself to be there, they didn't actually stay long. And so I was like, oh, I can actually start to feel like a little bit better.
Yeah.
But when my emotions kind of started to maybe feel like they were being seen and they were being regulated, my brain, like my thoughts got so loud, and I was like, holy crap, like what is going on? I was inside of my head. I couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And I had created all of these beliefs about myself, that I was incapable as a woman. I was a failure. I was unworthy. I was never going to have children. My journey ended here. Like that was it. I'm done. I'd never amount to anything. There was there was a lot of that had come up from my childhood as well, like the childhood wound that kind of got reopened. And no one loves me. And if no one loves me, I can't love me. Like my body's broken. And that was also a belief I had about myself for a long time, especially when my periods wouldn't go the way that they should. I always said my body was broken, which now I know is also disconnecting me further from myself. But so I had to, obviously there was a lot of, at that point, there was a lot of journaling. I didn't care what I wrote. I just wrote. I remember taking 5 pages in to my therapist. I'm like, I don't just read that. That's what's in my head.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, but here you go.
Here you go.
This is your problem now.
Yeah. That's what's coming out of me.
Oh my gosh.
That's what needed space. That's what needed to be seen. I didn't know how to put it into words, but to write it out, I could do that. And by writing it, I didn't have a journal per se. It was just a pad and a pen, and I just wrote. And I didn't judge anything that was coming out. I hated the stuff that was coming out though, because there was stuff in there. There was thoughts in there that I've never thought before. There was statements that were going right inside my head. Like, I wish other people would lose babies because then they'd know how I feel. And I'm like, that's not me. That's not the type of person I am. But I was hurting. So in that moment, that's what needed to be seen. That's what needed to come out.
Yeah.
And I hated all of the stuff that was coming out, but it needed to.
It needed to have its moment to be seen and heard. Yeah.
And not that I'd ever wish anything like this upon anyone.
Of course.
And
yeah.
it's just that in that moment, I needed a space for those really loud thoughts to stop swirling around inside my head and get out. So I ended up journaling every morning and every night. I would just write, and then I started to add in things that I was grateful for, because I was like, there's got to be, there was a quote that I read, and it said, every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day.
And I was like, quote.
Okay, there's something good. Are you sure?
Just like, so then that's a cute idea. Not sure about this one.
Yeah, are you sure? So I started to look for something that was good. And when it started, like what you said before, you start with baby steps. Like when I started, it was like, the sun's out. Okay, cool. Yeah, that was good. And then as I started doing more and more, I started to just, without journaling, being able to see, like I'd go for a walk, I'd stop and I'd smell the flowers, like literally smell the flowers and go, oh my gosh, they smell amazing. Yeah. I'd hear the birds chirping as I'm waking up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful sound to wake up to. And I started to naturally pull out the beauty that was in the day without having to write it down. And then it's just almost like this, it just flips. Like then it's almost like this natural progression. Like you just all of a sudden come out of the pain, and then you're like, how did I get here? Yeah. And the pain isn't so bad anymore. And then all of a sudden you can start to experience like the joy a little bit more. But you know, it is, and like you said before, it is hard work. Like healing and recovering, it's not a walk in the park. You have to choose yourself in all of it. First and foremost, you have to do it for yourself. You can't do it for your partner. You can't do it for your, like if you've got living children, you can't do it for the kids. You can't do it for your mum. Right. You have to do it for yourself, and it has to be a choice. And then you have to commit yourself to doing the work. Like it's possible to have an incredible life on the other side of loss. And I believe, like, without, there was a quote that I read the other night, and I was like, now I'm trying to remember.
You're like, this is so juicy. Yeah, maybe it'll come back.
It'll come back. It was pretty much just like around the concept of like, without pain, like you can't experience the beauty. And on the other side of loss, like, my life has been so much more intensely beautiful because I know what pain feels like, and I'm so much more grateful for the stuff that I have. Even there was moments with my rainbow baby that I was like, I am like falling apart again. I felt like she wasn't latching. My milk didn't come in properly. I kept getting infections in my breasts. Like it was like, it wasn't the way that I was told breastfeeding and being a mum would be. Yeah. I remember crying, like she was crying, I was crying for probably a solid 2 weeks. We were both just crying at each other. And even in those moments, I'm like, this is only a short period of time. Like I know that this is hard, this is shit, like this is not easy, but this also isn't going to last. Yep. So I allowed myself to feel like absolute crap, to feel like a failure again. But I knew that there's a quote and it says, rock bottom is going to teach you more than a mountaintop will.
Oh, I like that.
Rock bottom taught me so much.
Yeah.
It taught me that I can go back there and I can get myself back out because I know what it's like down there. And I know that I've been out. And I know if I go back, I've got the tools to get myself out. Yep. And when I read that, I was like, okay, so rock bottom, it's not a bad place to be. Yeah. Like, it's hard and it's crappy and it's painful and it's a horrible place, but it teaches you the resilience that you have inside of you. If you really want something, you'll dig your feet in and you'll get yourself out of there.
Absolutely. You will claw your way out one way or another.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
if your determination is not to stay in that place, you'll figure it
Then
out.
you won't.
You'll find the people that can help you as well.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said before, like, you shouldn't have to do it alone. There's not a moment in there that at all like you feel like this is your journey and you have to figure all of this path out on your own.
Yeah.
There are people that have gone before you and people that have walked that path, and then they're also there on the other side going, I can help you through that.
Yeah.
If you're willing to put out your hand and say, I can't do this alone. I need support. And your journey will be so much better for that, for you being able to have the courage to reach out and go, I need help.
Absolutely. It takes a big person to do that. It's overwhelming to do that. It's scary to do that. And I think it's especially scary for those who don't feel ready or feel like they'll never be ready or there's never going to be a good time. There's a million excuses we could make to not reach that hand out and help. And I just love that visual of what you just said. That's all it is. It's just like, here's my this is a step, right?
Mm.
And we don't have to take it on faster than we need to. I know, like with society and getting back to work and taking care of children that are here, can make it feel like we have to do it faster. But we are, I feel like this is so cliche to say in this loss and grief space, but like we are all on our own timelines with this. But the day-to-day coping, I think, is some of the worst parts of it, because it's in those micro moments. It's in those little day-to-day things that is where some of the most pain, I think, can live. But I love so much what you said about, not just the rock bottom, but something you touched on that kind of just alluded to, like, knowing how much more beautiful life is having gone through the darkness. I always like to say, like, grief and loss and everything that brings out a lot of gray. Life can look very gray. It's very ho-hum. It doesn't feel the way that it once did. We can just long for the way that it was before. But grief also shows us colors that we never would have seen before, like Technicolor, if we let it, and there is so much to appreciate. And I know how twisted that sounds. And if anybody here listening is like, Terry, this is a crock of shit, I don't agree with any of this. I don't see how you can see so much pretty color in loss. You don't have to agree with me on this. You don't have to see it right now. That's not where anybody's asking you to be. It's just to plant the seed to know that, like, here you are listening to two people who are telling you that color, it comes. And I also love what you said too, that there's maybe no like crazy big defining moment of when that moment comes. It's one day. It might not even be that big of an aha moment, but you're kind of like, I'm actually doing okay. I'm hanging in there. I'm doing better than I thought I would. Like, what a pleasant surprise. I have no idea how I got here, but I'm here. But that's when, like, this beautiful journey of like kind of reflection and hindsight and stuff comes, that we can then look back on. And then we sort of realize all of the little bits of work that we did, whether or not we even realized we were doing it at the time, that sort of got us there. And I'm like, wow, I need to be really proud of that. That is really cool. But it does take that. It's a conscious decision. It's I've been using the word intentional a lot lately. It is very intentional. But it's an opportunity to like get curious with your grief and with what this loss can give you. I mean, if you're going to channel your energy into anything, like channel it into that curiosity. And, of course, letting some of the depending on how early people are listening here and their, in their grief journey, this might not be quite where some people are at, but just, when it feels right. And that's why journaling is so beautiful. Love everything you said about journaling. I echo it absolutely exactly how you worded it. Noticing those little things to be grateful for, all the things, when we can take a step back and have those moments of hindsight or, whatever. That is where so much of the magic happens or happened. And then we didn't realize it did, but then we're here and we're like, okay. And then you're just grateful. You don't even like care how you got there. You're just like, well, something worked out. This is, this is great. But you've just hit on so many important and impactful, ways to kind of help get us there. So thank you for that. I want to definitely move into a couple things here, but I would be also remiss if I didn't bring up husbands or partners or the dads of these babies that we lose. And I kind of just want to open it up to you. I mean, and again, with all respect to your husband and however much he would be comfortable with you sharing, but just how did you fare through some of that?
This is where a lot of relationships do fall apart.
Yep.
Because you assume that the other person is going to be feeling the way that you're feeling and they're not.
Absolutely.
And then you're like, well, you don't care at all then because, you're not feeling the way that I'm feeling.
Yep.
But they are going through the whole grieving process. It just looks different and they're at a different stage.
Yep.
He's trying to obviously keep things running because I couldn't. And it was a really hard place. I don't know how long we were in that place for.
Yeah.
That
kind of just like black some of it out in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously we're still together. So through it, but it was just a really hard place to be in. And only now, like on the other side of it. So when we fell pregnant again, it was a very, very reserved happiness when we found out that we were pregnant.
Sure.
And it was probably not until halfway through the pregnancy that he opened up and told me how scared he was for me through the loss and then also now through this second pregnancy. And I was like, I reflected back over him in every element of him being there. He was there by my side through every single step that, I went through the loss.
Yeah.
Like he witnessed it. That's trauma for him too.
Absolutely.
And I didn't give him, he got support obviously from his mum. Like his mum was with us as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really hard when you're trying to navigate your own grief and also think of the other person as well. But if there is any way that you can go, like have a special moment in the day, like whether it's not a few minutes, but maybe half an hour or something, where you go, okay, this is just our time to just get everything out. This is how I'm feeling. And then you can allow the other person to tell you how they're feeling.
I love that.
If there's any way that you can create that, like that's going to be so powerful because you physically can't, as much as I wanted to be there for him, I'm only reflecting back over that moment going, I wish I was there for him.
Mm-hmm.
But in the moment, I was so caught up in my own grief, my navigating my pain, that there was no way that I could be there for him and try and help him through his pain.
Mm-hmm.
The only way that you can is to create that safe and judgmental free space where you're just like, okay, this is just a place where we can get it all out and share how you're feeling. And even if the other person doesn't want to talk, just at least one person can get out where they're at. Yeah. Because obviously the female is more inclined to share.
Yeah.
The male, not so much, because sometimes depending on, how they've been brought up, they can be that like, I need to be stoic, I need to be strength, I can't show emotions. So, my husband, he cried when we found out, obviously, that we had the miscarriage. It was the first time I've seen him cry.
Wow.
And then that was the only time I saw him cry. Like he didn't cry then after that until, he still didn't cry, but, halfway through the second pregnancy, he expressed how scared he was.
Yeah.
So, it's really hard I think assumption is what can bring us all undone, because we're just assuming that the other person's going to be feeling a certain way. And when they're not, we then assume that they don't care.
Yeah.
Or they're not grieving, but they are. It just looks different.
Yeah.
And so if you can create that space, even if you just cry for half an hour, just be in each other's presence for that period of time and just allow it to be whatever it is, but just be judgment free. And you're not going to fix each other. You don't need to be sharing opinions or whatever. It's just
right. It's not even about that. It's just
you talk and then I talk,
holding space. Yeah.
Because it's such a hard place to navigate if you're not, like, as my husband's not much of a communicator. Like he'll communicate when we're walking. So and I also, when I was doing my programs, like after the fact, how to support men through it, and then obviously like being shoulder to shoulder with people. Like that's why they go to bars. They'll sit on stools and they're shoulder to shoulder. They don't like being face to face.
I never put that together. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to unpack that now. That's a fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Maybe they think it's weird that someone's actually looking at them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's funny.
So my husband, when I reflect over all of the moments where my husband has opened up and talked to me, we've either been sitting in bed, like shoulder to shoulder. We used to sit on the step at the front door. We'd be shoulder to shoulder, or we're walking. So we're shoulder to shoulder.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Each other.
Sure.
So he starts to open up, obviously, in certain situations. So it's obviously finding too, like, what works.
Yeah.
Try not to bring alcohol into the mix. Try not to make it like a wine and dine type thing. Like it's just, you want it to be just talking, because alcohol's not actually going to help you with your emotions and thoughts and everything.
Great point.
But yeah, I think the assumption piece is what actually can bring us all undone, because then we're not actually communicating like what the truth is about it.
Yeah. I would absolutely say that's where my now husband and I took a wrong turn or two as well. And it's like, we were communicating, but also not, but it was also really tough. First of all, that's amazing advice. And I wish we had thought of that to set that even half hour, whatever it was, aside and just let it all out. And I feel like we probably did intermittently, but it's so hard also in grief. Like sometimes you don't know how you're feeling. You don't even know, like, and I was, for example, like seeing my mom in the hospital at this point, or once my mom was gone, then I was seeing my dad in the hospital. I was always visiting someone in the freaking hospital. It's sort of what it felt like. And I had to process it myself. I didn't even know what I would have said, but I think what you just said is beautiful too. You don't have to say anything. You can cry. You can sit in silence. It's just about the coming togetherness of it and doing our best not to push them away, because they probably are trying to help. They might just not be doing it in the way that you need. Like I always think of love languages, the 5 love languages with that, and like figuring out what the other person wants and needs. Like I read that book and it's helpful, because I realized like, okay, he receives love and he needs to express love a little bit differently than I do. And so when that's not something you might think to do in the moment, but there's really a lot to learn about your partner. It can actually add to your intimacy when you go through something traumatic like this, which I know is so twisted and confusing, but it's true. And, adversity, it brings out our true colors, right? So, but I don't necessarily say that in a bad way. It's just, it's good in a way to see these sides of each other. But no, I think that you answered that question beautifully, of just how we can just acknowledge the partners in these situations, and just, that I think there is so much focus on the moms, as there should be. I mean, we're physically the ones going through a lot of this, but they exist too. And they need to be acknowledged, I guess.
Yes.
So
And they a lot of the time don't have the ways to express it.
No. And I mean, you brought up a great point too. And my husband's very much like this too. A lot of them, even more so than women oftentimes, are conditioned to, like you said, like keep it in or not show it, and just all of that stereotypical stuff that are expected of boys and men and all the things. And my husband was the same way. He grew up in a very like sports oriented household, rub some dirt on it and you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. It's okay to not be fine. And, so I think that's just such a beautiful practice. Like, again, that holding space, because we give ourselves permission and, open that door to not be fine, at least for that little bit of time. And I love what I'm even going back even further, what you were saying earlier, but I do want to just like reiterate this because I think it's so important what you said when you were talking earlier about, feeling your emotions. Like, you obviously did an amazing job, and whether this came right away or whenever this came, but you really allowed yourself to feel and release it however you needed it to. But I remember you said, they almost like didn't hang around as long as as they would have, or you thought they would have. Like, it helped you heal faster. So I just want to like hammer this home too for anybody who is struggling with releasing those emotions or scared to, because you're scared or fearful of the pain. That's so valid. I mean, who wants to knowingly commit ourselves to that, to get into that? Yeah, it freaking hurts. Like, that's the point, right? But it's that ripping the Band-Aid off thing. Like, sometimes just ripping it off, it hurts. It hurts in the moment, but you can like put that compression on it and you're like, okay, that's over. As opposed to the slow rip that just feels like it's never going to end. And so it's just, I don't know, just goes to what you were saying as far as just not having fear around expressing that and knowing it is going to hurt. It is going to suck. It is shit. But it could either be all of that for a slightly shorter amount of time or you can make the choice to prolong it. The choice is kind of up to you. It's a little bit of tough love right now, but it's true. One way or another, we will feel it. So, but that's the beauty of it. We get to decide on our terms how that looks and how that goes. Which is
it's like
such a gift.
It's just feeling the feelings to completion. Like,
if
you can feel them to completion, it actually leaves your body.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, when you choose not to, again, it's a choice. If you're like, no, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine, but just know that that's not actually supporting you. That's actually just pushing it back inside, and it's going to come back.
Well said.
And it will keep coming back until you can feel it to completion, until you can see it. And some people, prolong that for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then it actually, like when we suppress emotions for long enough, it actually has a physical representation to it. You'll get pain,
Absolutely.
physical pain in your body.
Yep.
So, there is other, ramifications if we don't feel the feelings in the moment. Our body doesn't see them as negative or positive emotions. They just, our body is just an emotion. Like,
mm-hmm.
It's just sadness. It's just anger. It's just, whatever it is. Our body doesn't say this is a negative emotion or this is a positive one.
Yep.
It's just an emotion. And if we can strip away the labels for that as well, yes, like you said, it's going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be painful.
No one said it was easy.
No, and none of those emotions are nice.
Right.
Like, when you're sad, everything hurts. Like, your body just hurts.
Yeah.
But it's not permission, I guess, from your body to say don't feel it.
Mm-hmm.
You need to feel it. And some people are afraid to cry because they'll feel like they won't stop.
Yes.
You will naturally stop. It will stop.
Yeah.
Like, the tears will stop coming. You will feel instant relief.
Absolutely.
Like, when you can give yourself the permission.
Yeah. It's such a release. And you do feel that, not only just mentally too. And sometimes you might feel, I remember there were times where I would cry so hard that I would get not only mentally exhausted, but physically exhausted too. But I did feel better. I mean, my face felt like a freaking balloon because it was like so swollen, but that's par for the course, right? Like, fine, do it in the comfort of your own home. And so you're not going to see anyone for a little while. Okay, fine. But avoiding it is not the answer either. So yeah, all of that, so well said. Oof. Okay. I know there was so much jam packed into part one of this episode. You can probably understand why I split this into two now. I want to make this as digestible for you as possible. I really hope you enjoyed part one today. Keep your eye out for part two that is coming next week. It will launch on Thursday, as always. And for right now, I am sending you so much love and hugs, my friend. If you need any support, please do not hesitate to reach out. My DMs, my inbox, it's always open to you. Feel free to find me on Instagram at Losses Become Gains or at Losses Become Gains Podcast, or you can email hello@lossesbecomegains.com. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you're taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, coping tools, ways to work with me, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, connecting with you, and hearing your story, and ultimately supporting you however I can. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.